Hello everybody, AstroMommy here. So in the last video in this series, we took a deep dive into Donald Trump's astrology and we looked at his progressions, his annual perfections, his solar return for 2024, and all of that related to his natal chart, as well as the natal chart and the transits of election day. And in this video, we're going to do the same thing, but with Vice President Kamala Harris. And we're going to take a look at her natal chart. We're going to discuss what in her natal chart actually shows that she has within her natal promise the promise of being a vice president or a president, a leader of some kind. And we're going to also go over the transits to her natal chart, as well as the annual perfections, progressions, and her solar return. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to minimize my screen here, and we're going to take a look at her natal chart to start us off. Okay. So here we have Kamala Harris's natal chart. Now she has a sun in Libra at 27 degrees Libra. She has an Aries moon at 27 degrees Aries. She was born on a full moon. She also has her ascendant here at 24 degrees Gemini with the North Node in conjunction with that. Partile conjunction. It's really, really close. 24 degrees Gemini of the North Node. Now, there are lots of videos out there talking about all of her natal astrology. So for this video, what I just want to focus on is what in her chart shows that she could be a prominent leader in the United States of America. What shows that she has that in her natal chart? And the answer to that, I believe, is with her ascendant and her sun and her natal Saturn all being in a trine. Now, her ascendant's at 24 degrees Gemini, trine her natal Saturn at 28 degrees Aquarius, and the sun is applying to a trine to her natal Saturn from 27 degrees Libra, and then the ascendant and the sun are in trine as well. So that is a grand air trine. Air is the element that represents intellect and strategy and communication. And it's also of the nature of Jupiter. It's called the sanguine temperament, which is the nature of Jupiter. And it's going to show somebody who has a lot of joviality and Jupiterian, ideals and, likes to acquire knowledge, as well as loves to communicate and is a fun, jovial, social person. So I think that we can see that in her personality and in the ways that she goes about doing her job as vice president. Now, I believe that aspect, that grand trine that we see in air, is what needs to be triggered in order for her to achieve success. Now, it was triggered in 2020 when she became the vice president. And I believe it's being triggered again now. And if you haven't watched my horary video, I'll put a link to it here. It's the first in this series. And that is where I discuss in the horary chart how it shows that Vice President Kamala Harris will win the presidency. And I think that her natal chart and transits are testimonies with that as well. They're corroborative and supporting the horary chart as well. Now, something else that I think that is really fascinating in her natal chart is that she has the moon in Aries. And what that shows me is that her life, the circumstances of her life are about pioneering and being the first of things. And she was and is the first female vice president, as well as, going along to, and if she wins the presidency, then she will be the first female president. And that is like breaking through barriers with that Aries moon. It's so Aries moon, it's really interesting to see that in her natal chart. Okay. Additionally, if you watched my video, my second video on the election astrology, and also where I talked about the moles, marks, and scars for the horary chart, showing the physical characteristics of the ascendant for Trump and the physical characteristics for the descendant for Kamala Harris. I talked about that a little bit in that video. Additionally, if we look at this here, just with the moon in Aries, this would show that Kamala Harris has some sort of mole, mark, or scar on her head. And she actually does have a scar above her left eyebrow, and that she got when she was a kid from a bully who threw a rock at her head, and she ended up having to get stitches, and she was defending her friend, from this bully, which I think is so Aries moon like. And then to have a scar, which is, Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars, traditionally also represents scars and injuries and accidents and that kind of stuff, as well as fighting for something. And she got this scar while fighting for her friend. The moon is in her 11th house of friends, and Mars rules the 11th house of friends. And she got a scar fighting for her friend. I think that is just really, really fascinating that shows up in her natal chart. Okay. Next, let's take a look at her solar return for 2024. So on the screen, you can see her solar return here for 2024. Now, the solar return is always when the sun returns back to its natal position. So of course, we have the sun at 27 degrees Libra. That's the same as her natal chart. The moon is at 12 degrees Gemini, approaching a conjunction with Jupiter. That's in her natal ascendant, her natal first house. That's going to show a great abundance in her first house of personal health and environment and prestige and success and whatnot. And it's also in a trine to that natal Saturn, right? We'll look at the bi-wheel of these two charts together so you can follow what I'm saying. The ascendant in her solar return is in Sagittarius, which is her 7th house in her natal chart. But the ascendant in Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and it's also angular in her natal house. So this shows a prominence for Jupiterian ideals, acquiring knowledge, expanding your influence in that year, as well as we have Venus conjunct the ascendant. So that is a really, really positive thing for her this year. It means that, she's going to kind of have like a glow up. Venus is going to bestow her blessings and wishes, on Kamala Harris this year. And she's, so she's being blessed by both benefics. They are in an opposition. It's a wide opposition in the solar return. But by whole sign, they are in opposition. So this is definitely sort of like there's opposing influences this year between her values and her belief systems, as well as making, large purchases and whatnot, that kind of a thing going on this year. So anyway, let's take a look at the bi-wheel so that what I'm saying makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so here we have Vice President Kamala Harris's chart on the inside wheel, and on the outside wheel, we have her solar return for 2024. Okay, so the ascendant for the solar return is over here in her 7th house of Sagittarius. That's going to show a focus with, other people, a focus with partnerships, a focus on her open enemies, and a focus on business relationships. It could also show some, litigation in the year, but because Venus is there, conjunct the ascendant, I think that represents harmony in her relationships rather than strife and discord. She also has Saturn conjunct the IC in the solar return chart, and that's in the 10th house of her natal chart. So Saturn conjunct the IC can mean a couple of things. One, it could mean, an ending or a death in the family. This could mean that there's a restructuring to her foundations. It also could mean that she is staying where she is due to limitations. Now, I think that's really interesting considering the fact that, one, if she lost the election, then she would be moving out of the White House, and that would definitely be, an ending to where she lives. If she wins the election, then she's going to be having a restructuring of where she lives because she will be moving within the same space. So I think in either way, it kind of shows that could be showing up in the chart, whether she wins or loses. Now, I think that it's really interesting that that Saturn is in a square to the solar return moon, and the moon is in that first house. So let me put a line here. So Saturn square the moon is going to show a lot of pressure on a person during the year. There's going to be a lot of pressure, and there's going to be a lot of limitations, and there's going to be a lot of, scrutiny going on for the person and their home life and their body and their health and all of that. We obviously know that is the case when for either candidate, there's a lot of scrutiny on their health and what they do in their daily life and their circumstances and all of that kind of stuff. But it definitely shows a lot of pressure emotionally. There's also a lot of pressure to behave a certain way and to have your emotions very controlled, because that square with Saturn is going to represent controlled emotions, that there is sort of a governing authority body or whatever that is trying to put pressure and control the emotions of the native. So I definitely think that obviously there's so much pressure being a candidate for the, being a candidate in general and trying to control the emotions in that situation. So there's a lot of that going on, which could be kind of hard considering that Kamala Harris has a moon in Aries, and, having control over the emotions could be one of those hard things that, could be, difficult this year. But there's a lot of pressure to control the emotions. Anyway, let's see. Additionally, this year, Saturn is also putting pressure on her natal Venus. Now, I wonder if that will show up in her family life. We have Venus in the natal house, the natal fourth house of family, and Venus is also a natural signifier for sisters. And so I wonder if there will be anything with her sister or her sister's health or anything like that that could possibly be going on. But it also kind of represents in the opposition that there is a decision to be made between values and duty. And I think that, she has values and commitments to her family that you can see in the fourth house here with Venus being there, but then also values and commitments to her office, her position in office, which you can see with Saturn in the 10th here. And so there could be, kind of a tug of war, like, do I really want to do this or whatever? I'm sure she went through those questions before she decided to run. So, but it's interesting that it shows up in the solar return. All right. So I just want to point out that just like in Trump's chart with the solar return and with the transits, Jupiter was activating his natal trine between the sun and Jupiter that could point to a win. Jupiter is also activating Kamala Harris's natal trine that could show a win. And we have that here. Jupiter in the first house is conjoined her ascendant, and that, activates that trine to Saturn, which activates and also activates the trine to the sun. And so we have that grand air trine being activated by Jupiter conjoining the ascendant. So that is really positive. Now, in Trump's chart, if you guys watched the last video, then you know that I saw that there was, a prohibition happening between Saturn and his natal sun and moon. Saturn is making a square to his sun and moon, and will be making that square more directly. We'll be making that square tighter after he goes direct and approaches those exact degrees. The square will get tighter. Now, let's take a look in the solar return. In the solar return, we do have Saturn transiting Saturn at the time of the solar return in a square to the moon, which is one of her lights, but it is not in a square to the sun. So that could prohibit, something in the circumstances. There could be something that doesn't go according to plan. She could win, but maybe, there's the whole thing about whether the Senate is, Democratic or Republican, or the House of Representatives is Democratic or Republican, or vice versa, and how much power she would have, if the Senate or the House of Representatives, if the Senate was Republican or whatnot. So there could be some restrictions in terms of how much freedom she has as the president. And that could be showing up here with the square to the moon in the solar return. Now let's take a look at her chart with the election day transits. So first, briefly, let's see, make sure I'm on the right chart. Okay. So first, briefly, here is election day. So we have Mars having just ingressed into Leo. The sun is at 14 degrees Scorpio. The moon is at 5 degrees Capricorn, squaring the nodes from the southern bending. Venus is at 23 Sagittarius, and Saturn is at 12 degrees Pisces. Jupiter's at 20 degrees Gemini, moving retrograde. So, and of course, we have Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn in direct motion. So let's take a look at the bi-wheel of the two charts of Kamala Harris's chart on the inside of the bi-wheel with the election day on the outside. So here you see the two charts together, Kamala Harris's natal chart on the inside and election day, November 5th, the transits of election day on the outside. Now, on election day, there are some positive things happening to her chart. We have, obviously, Jupiter is still within range of her ascendant. That is positive, activating that trine that I talked about. We have Venus applying to a trine to her moon, which is very benefic. And we also have Venus applying to a sextile to her sun. So Venus is making harmonious aspects to her natal lights. That is very benefic. That shows a lot of support. Venus also represents popularity. And so I think that also is a supporting testimony for what the horary said, that the vote of the people would go to Kamala Harris. Now, there was a lot of questions in my horary chart video about whether or not that also included the Electoral College. And with the research that I've done so far, I believe that what the moon does in a horary chart like that does encompass both the popular vote and the Electoral College. It just shows where, it just shows who will win. But I could be wrong about that. I'm going to continue to research that, and we'll see what happens and how the horary chart is either proven correct or incorrect. And one of the things that I like to do as an astrologer is, be a hermetic astrologer. And that is take what I am observing and actually learn from it. So I make a prediction, and if I get it wrong, I go back and I look at that and I analyze how I got it wrong and how the chart was actually showing me the correct answer. What did I miss? So these are really great learning opportunities. I'm not claiming to be a master of astrology ever. I think I'll be a student forever. Which I think is, something that we have to accept the fact that, astrology is expanding forever. And it's like a fractal. Okay, I could get into this all day, but it just goes on and on forever. There's so many layers and levels and things, different ways to turn the jewel, as my teacher says, and look at it from a different perspective. And so we have to remember that we are students here, and that we need to, have a sense of humility. And, the chart will show us what's going on, but we as the reader can make, we can make mistakes. We can see it wrong, and it's okay. It's okay to be wrong. So I just want to put that out there with all transparency, that I am doing these charts and looking at these charts, not to show like how great I am or whatever, but to learn from astrology and to learn how these things are showing up, because I find it super fascinating, right? Okay, so we have this nice supportive testimony from Venus to the lights for Kamala Harris. That is a really great positive. We also have Jupiter in the ascendant, conjunct the ascendant, and moving through her first house, activating that natal trine. On election day, we do also have Saturn still in that square position. The moon has moved on from her solar return. So Saturn is squaring the ascendant, squaring the first house, but it's not hitting it by degree, and it's not actually prohibiting Venus anymore. We already had the square with Venus and Saturn. So I don't see this actually prohibiting a win on election day. But, and Saturn is not squaring her lights in general this year. Her lights are 27 Libra and 27 Aries. So Saturn is not actually activating those in a negative way. So I think that shows that Saturn is not prohibiting a win for Kamala Harris. So those are the supportive things that I see going on for her on election day. Now let's take a look at her progressions and talk about her annual Profections to see if those show a win for her as well. All right, so here is the progressed chart. Now, progressions is a modern technique that says that each day represents a year of a person's life after they were born. So this represents, Kamala Harris just turned 60, I believe. And so this represents the 60th day after she was born and where the planets were. So we take a look at this and think about how it relates to the natal chart. So the ascendant here is in Leo. In her natal chart, that's going to be the third house of communication and what her message is out to the world. And then we also have the moon in Cancer in the 12th house of the progressed chart, but it would also be the second house of the natal chart, which shows an emphasis on, one in the 12th house. It's going to show something behind the scenes, could show hidden enemies. It could show, feelings of that liminal space where you're in between things. And that is definitely where she's at right now. Although the moon won't move into that first house for another 15 or 16 months. but then it'll be coming into the first house of this progressed chart, and also into the third house of her natal chart. And so, but the emphasis on the second house of her natal chart shows that there's going to be that she's going to be thinking a lot about her finances as well as her skill sets and the skills that she has to bring to the table. So I think that that's interesting. I also think that something else that's really interesting and that does show an increase of power and status is that we have Jupiter here in a trine with Pluto in the progressions. And that shows, an increase in her status, an increase in power, an increase in abundance, and an increase in prosperity. So I definitely feel like the progressions could be showing that, as well as we have Uranus there closely with Pluto. And that could be like, how she is, breaking through and becoming, she's already the first female vice president. And if she won the presidency, then she would be the first female president. Oh, and that reminds me, I didn't talk about this. Let's switch back to her solar return real quick here. Okay, on her solar return, we have these two Thor's hammers that are going on. And so I wanted to highlight that. We have the sun in a square to Pluto, representing great power struggles and great ambition for, a great and powerful ambition. And they're both in sesquiquadrates to the moon, which is trying to punch through something with her circumstances. And then also there's another Thor's hammer between the moon and Saturn and the sun additionally. So that is, having limitations on your circumstances, having great pressure and everything to control your emotions, and then also punching through with something that you feel very ambitious about. So these two Thor's hammers are really breaking through some sort of status quo that is going on. And I think that that's really interesting. And at first when I looked at this, I thought, could this represent a winning year for her where she increases her power in leadership? And she could break through these barriers, but it will be difficult and she will have to fight a lot and fight very hard for things. That could also represent the whole year as a whole in terms of having to fight lots of established structures that could be, traditionally blocking her path, kind of a thing. But we do have in the solar return, just as we have on election day, a nice sextile and trine. In the solar return, Venus is making a sextile and trine to the nodes, and that represents something, that she values coming about for her in an easy and effortless way. So there is something that is coming that she can influence, that she values deeply, that she's going to be able to do, but it's going to craft, she's going to have to fight through it with these Thor's hammers. That is a lot of energy, action, and pushing on things to make things happen. Can she do it? We'll find out. I don't know, Okay, so we've actually finished with the progressed chart, the things that I wanted to talk about. Let's go back to her natal chart so we can talk about her annual perfections. Now, she just turned 60 years old on October 20th, 2024, and that means that she's in a first house perfection year ruled by Mercury. So first house perfection year is going to give an emphasis on, your personal self, your physical appearance, your attitude, your personality, and your immediate environment and circumstances. And so having a first house perfection year seems very, seems like a good one to go along with becoming the first female president of the United States, and is supportive of that. So additionally, we're going to be looking at what is happening with Mercury this year in relationship to her natal chart. Now, let's take a look and just see what is going on when we look at the bi-wheel of her natal chart and the election day. What is going on with Mercury? So Mercury is here at 4 degrees Sagittarius. Now, that also is hitting that ascendant degree in her solar return. So Mercury is conjoining that Venus in her solar return. So that could be positive since Mercury is conjoining the Venus in her solar return, right? Something to note though is that Mercury's in detriment in Sagittarius, so that doesn't look good in terms of a first house perfection year ruled by Mercury in terms of, getting, having a successful win. So there's another thing that shows up that could be, a doubtful thing. But this Mercury is in trine to Mars. That could be showing that there is, that could be showing that there's a lot of aggressive verbal, attacks or whatnot and everything going on that she, then has to defend herself against. Not quite sure. But it is also in trine to the North Node at 5 degrees Aries, so this could be positive. This trine happening with Mars and Mercury and the North Node. That could show that her, that the annual perfection ruler Mercury is getting supported by, people, and also people willing to fight for what they believe in and fight for the legacy that they want. So that could be some supportive energy. We will find out on election day if that's supportive or destructive. It's hard to say with Mars in the North Node. But it is nice benefic trines, which are the nature of Jupiter. So that is positive. I do like to see Mercury and Venus coming together in her solar return on that day. So that is also positive. So we will see. So I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the astrology for Kamala Harris and the election day. If you haven't checked out the playlist that I created and all the other videos in this series, you can check out the horary chart. You can check out the astrology for election day in general and how it relates to the United States natal chart. That was video number 2. Video number 3 was the astrology for Donald Trump and all of the different charts and whatnot, and his solar return and everything. What we just did here with Vice President Kamala Harris, that's what I did in that video for Trump. And then this video, obviously you just watched this. So if I put out any more videos, I will link them here or put them in the playlist. I might do a couple of other horary charts before the election. I'm not sure. Just depends on what I have time for and all that good stuff. But I hope you enjoyed this. I'd love to hear your comments down below. So let me know. All right. Take care, everybody.